The vast majority of people in the world don't hold Bitcoin yet. But even among those who do, there are many who don't truly understand exactly what it is. As Bitcoin continues to grow and ever more people begin to accumulate it, those who have this knowledge will have an edge over the rest of humanity. So, in this video, we're going to go back to basics and explain in simple terms what Bitcoin is and how it works. In just a few minutes' time, Bitcoin, along with all the terms associated with it like blockchain, mining, proof of work, and private keys, will all make sense. Perhaps the simplest way to think about Bitcoin is to begin with an example. So, let's say I owe you $10. How am I going to pay you? Well, the simplest way for me to do that would be for me to give you $10 in cash. Now, there are a few things which make this a good way to do it. For a start, it's instant. The moment I hand over the cash, our debt is settled. You have your money and can then do whatever you need to do with it. There's also no third party involved. It's just me giving you the money directly. This is known as a peer-to-peer transaction. We don't need to involve anyone else, and most importantly, we don't need to trust anyone else. There's no need for a bank or any other sort of middleman to get involved, which means that it's a private transaction as well. The only people who need know that it has taken place are you and me. But of course, there's one rather big problem with my paying you in cash. We have to be in the same place. Sure, I could put the cash in the post, but then we'd have to trust the postal service to deliver it. It would also take time, and I'd have to pay the postage costs too. So perhaps we could wait until we are in the same place. Well, if you happen to live in a different country, you might be waiting a while for your money. If you need the money quickly, that's no good. Assuming our paths aren't going to be crossing anytime soon, how do I get you your $10? In today's world, there are, of course, a lot of ways of sending money electronically. I could send it to you via a bank transfer, though it might take a while, especially if we're in different countries and using different currencies. Anyone who's tried to do an international bank transfer before will know it ain't straightforward or quick. You could end up waiting several days for the money to arrive, and in the meantime, you won't have the use of that money. We could use a money transfer service like Western Union or MoneyGram and pay a hefty fee to do so. I could pay you using a debit or credit card if you have the facility set up to receive those sorts of payments, or we could use PayPal or a similar such service. There are, in short, a number of ways to do it, but they all involve a middleman of some kind, be it a bank, card network, money transfer service, or a platform like PayPal. We've had to trust at least one other entity to ensure the transfer happens at all. So, the ideal solution to this problem is a form of digital cash that can be transferred peer-to-peer without having to trust any third parties and that can settle a payment quickly between two people in two different places. Well, that is essentially what Bitcoin is. Let's delve a little deeper into this. Bitcoin is a software program, an online network that enables value to be transferred across the internet between individual users without the need for an intermediary. This software program has a built-in currency, also known as Bitcoin, with a small b. You transfer value using Bitcoin, small b, on the Bitcoin, capital B, network. The currency is often referred to by its ticker symbol, BTC, so from here on I'll use BTC to describe Bitcoin the currency as opposed to the network the currency exists on. Now this network was created by an unknown individual who went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. His real identity, assuming he's a he, is unknown. Satoshi published the Bitcoin white paper, which explained in depth how Bitcoin works and why it was created, on the 31st of October 2008. It was titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and its opening line reads, quote, "A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution." All of which brings us to the tricky problem Satoshi had to solve. How do you create a system that allows people to transact over the internet but which doesn't have some form of centralized authority in the middle keeping track of everything? How do you cut financial institutions out of the equation and allow everyone to just transact peer-to-peer? It's an incredibly difficult problem because if you don't have a third party keeping track of everyone's spending, then how do you make sure everyone is only spending what they have? If there's no one keeping a record, how do you stop people spending their digital money many times over? In short, how do you engineer something that doesn't require trust? It's no use expecting people to be honest and only spend the digital money they actually have because, well, they're people and will eventually act out of self-interest. There has to be a way to prevent them from acting dishonestly. Otherwise, there's no point in even trying to make the system work. Now, in everyday life, there are ways to stop us doing this. Cash is hard to forge, and you can expect to be punished if you try. When transacting electronically, banks keep a tally of how much everyone has and when they spend or receive money. When you spend on your card or make a bank transfer, your bank updates your balance to reflect that and will make sure you're not able to spend beyond a certain agreed amount. So again, we have to rely on a third party to keep track of things. We have to trust that third party to keep honest records, and we also have to trust that the central bank issuing the currency in question won't devalue it by printing more and more of it, which is pretty much what every central bank around the world has been doing in recent years. Satoshi figured out the answer to this problem, and it's one of the things which makes Bitcoin so revolutionary. Rather than have one centralized entity keeping track of all transactions and balances, Bitcoin is engineered so that anyone running a node on its network keeps a record of all transactions and balances. Now, a node is basically a computer that has downloaded and is running the Bitcoin software. You can think of each node as being like an individual bookkeeper. So, imagine a big accounts ledger distributed across all nodes on the network that's being constantly updated in real time. It's constantly being checked and verified by these nodes to keep everyone honest. You see, that's the thing with a ledger or database kept by a bank or other financial institution. These databases are centralized. All the records are kept in one place. The problem with this is that with all that data in that one place, just imagine what could happen if, for example, someone with bad intentions were to gain access to it. Imagine if a hacker managed to gain access to the database of a big bank and alter or destroy all its records. The results would not be pretty. So, Satoshi's way of enabling people to transact on the Bitcoin network was to use a distributed ledger system like that just described. Every transaction that takes place on the network gets checked and validated by the nodes. Every few minutes, the records of these validated transactions are grouped together into a block. These blocks get linked together to form a chain of blocks, or, as it's more commonly known, a blockchain. Here's the thing though. Each block is linked to the one before it using an encoding process known as hashing. Without getting into too much detail here, this means that if someone were able to alter the information in a block, say to award themselves more BTC than they actually had, then this would mean having to alter all the information in all the blocks that come after it. In other words, the network would notice that something fishy was going on and reject the change. This feature helps to make the Bitcoin blockchain an immutable record of transactions. Not only is there no central authority overseeing it all, but it's virtually impossible to tamper with the record. But you might be wondering how the network is maintained. After all, if there's no central authority overseeing things, then who exactly is? And what's in it for them? As we've seen, the network is made up of nodes. Now, running a Bitcoin node is actually a pretty straightforward process and can be done on a basic computer running the Bitcoin software. It doesn't require vast amounts of processing power, and the only really specialized requirement is a decent amount of storage in order that the node in question can store Bitcoin's full transaction history. There aren't really any rewards for running a node as such, other than knowing that you're playing your part in helping to maintain the network and contributing to its decentralization. After all, the more nodes there are, the more bookkeepers there are overseeing the network. But there is another type of node that's a lot more involved with running the Bitcoin network and is financially incentivized to do so. These nodes are known as miners. Now, you might have wondered what mining has to do with an asset that exists only in digital form. Well, it relates to the way Bitcoin is designed. The number of units of BTC the software will issue over time is fixed at 21 million. No more than this will ever exist. Now, these coins aren't issued all at once. Their release is pre-programmed by the code Satoshi wrote. Every time a block is added to the blockchain, a predetermined number of coins are released in the form of a block reward. This block reward diminishes over time, slowing BTC's issuance and inflation rate. All the miners on the network compete for these block rewards. And this entire method of maintaining and keeping the network honest is called proof of work. Now, here's where things get a bit crazy. Bitcoin miners all want to be the one to add the latest block containing all those recent transactions to the blockchain and claim the block reward of freshly issued BTC. To do so, they all compete to be the first one to essentially guess a random number. Now, this massively oversimplifies what's going on, but we don't need to make it too complicated. The number all these miners are trying to guess is made up of a lot of digits, and that means they have to submit a lot of guesses as to what it might be. And I mean a lot of guesses, as in trillions of guesses, all while the rest of the miners on the network are doing the same. One miner eventually gets lucky, and the process begins all over again. And if you're wondering, yes, submitting all those guesses does indeed require a lot of computing power, which in turn uses a lot of electricity. This is why many say that Bitcoin mining is bad for the planet. Well, not if the energy being used is coming from renewable sources, as much of it now does, but that's a topic for another video. One last thing to note about Bitcoin for the purposes of this introduction, though. You might imagine that in order to use Bitcoin, you need to download and run the software, that is, be a node or a miner. Not so. Anyone with an internet connection can use Bitcoin to send BTC to any other Bitcoin user, no matter where they are on the planet. One of the fundamental ways in which Bitcoin functions as the most secure payment network on Earth is through the use of public key encryption. Now, there are 3 components to this, and they work together to enable anyone to use the network to transfer BTC. The first component is a private key, randomly generated for a new user by the Bitcoin software. This private key, as the name suggests, needs to be kept secret. Without it, you can't access your BTC, and if someone else gets hold of it, they can access your BTC. It's analogous to the password for your online banking service. Now, I'll tell you how private keys are stored in a minute. This private key is then used to generate a public key. Both of these keys, by the way, are rendered as long strings of letters and numbers. The private key is subjected to a mathematical process too complex to go into here, which generates the public key. Note that this process is irreversible. A public key can be generated from a private key, but not the other way around. This ensures your private key remains private. Your public key, meanwhile, again, as the name suggests, can be made public. It's analogous to your bank account number, and it's required for anyone to send you BTC. However, the public key itself undergoes one more set of mathematical processes before it can be shared with anyone wanting to send you BTC. The result is your Bitcoin address, which is again represented as a sequence of letters and numbers that can be copied and pasted in order to send BTC over the network. This address can also be represented by a QR code, which can then be scanned to obtain the receiving address. Now, back in Bitcoin's early days, the process of generating private keys, public keys, and addresses was a little more complicated than it is today. There were various sites that would do this process for you, or you could download and use the Bitcoin Core wallet. And there's another bit of Bitcoin-related jargon that it's important to understand. A Bitcoin wallet is another piece of software with two main functions: holding your private keys and holding your address. This then allows you to interact with the Bitcoin network to send and receive BTC. Nowadays, wallets have a little more functionality than this, but these two main functions are what's most important. So, with the Core wallet downloaded and set up, the only thing left to do was to get yourself some BTC. Which brings us to today. Now, these days, by far the easiest and most popular way of getting some BTC is to buy it through an exchange like Coinbase or Binance, for example. When you create an account on an exchange, it creates a wallet for you. And if you want to do this, then the link in the description will get you a nice bonus at some of the top-rated exchanges out there. Once you've set up an account, you then send regular money like dollars, euros, pounds, etc. to the exchange, buy BTC with it, and that BTC is recorded as being in your wallet on that exchange. Here's the important thing to remember though. Because your wallet is hosted by the exchange, it means that the exchange also holds your private keys. Now, it wouldn't be very good business for the exchange to use these private keys to send your BTC elsewhere, although dodgy exchanges have done just that in the past. But even the biggest exchanges can be hacked or, like FTX, be rotten behind the scenes. So, one of the most important things any Bitcoin holder can do is practice self-custody. That is, store your private keys yourself. This means that only you have access to your BTC. And here's a really important point to understand. When you hold your BTC balance in a wallet, what you're really doing is holding those private keys. The coins themselves exist as account balances on the blockchain. No one, not miners, nodes, exchanges, regular people like you and me, or even Satoshi himself, ever actually holds any coins. Everyone merely controls the means to access whatever amount of BTC the blockchain records them as having. Now, there's a lot of information about Bitcoin to take in there, so I'll close this introduction with the most important thing you need to be aware of if you are planning to get your hands on some BTC, now that you're familiar with the basics. Using a good exchange is the first step, but the next step should always be taking custody of your private keys yourself. The best way to do this is to use a wallet that you control, i.e. not one hosted by an exchange or any other third party. Remember, Bitcoin is designed to be trustless, which means if you're trusting someone else to hold your private keys, you're going against what Bitcoin itself stands for. Sure, trusting an exchange is convenient, and the best exchanges have strong security protocols in place, but you can never be sure. So, your options are either to download a software wallet, which will enable you to hold your keys securely on your laptop or mobile device, or get yourself a hardware wallet which stores your keys on an encrypted device that never interacts with the internet. Software wallets are good, and I have a video on the best ones in the description for you. However, a hardware wallet is the best level of security you can get, and so I advise checking out my video on the best ones of those too. Link to that is also in the description. Well, I hope you found this video useful, and believe me when I say the inner workings of Bitcoin go a lot deeper and get a lot more complex than what I talked about here. But this should have given you a basic understanding of what this amazing technology is and how it works. And if you want to learn more, then I'll leave links to some brilliant resources below that will help you dig even deeper into Bitcoin. Thank you for watching, and if you found this useful, then a like and a subscribe are always appreciated. If you know of others who would get value from this video, then please also feel free to share it with them. Check out my deals page below for those exchange offers I mentioned earlier, as well as discounts on hardware wallets too. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to see more videos like this that explain crypto in simple terms, then let me know in the comments. Till next time, my friends.